Hey folks, when it comes to cybersecurity, decisions are not always made in the best way. A lot of times, the decisions are made from a place of emotion, usually fear. I mean, when you look at cybersecurity vendors, the marketing is often done from a place of fear, uncertainty, and doubt. And unfortunately, it works. There's a lot of organizations that make decisions based on emotions and not necessarily from a place of data. And so on today's episode of SysAdmin Weekly, I've got Paul Schnackenberg on the line. And today we're going to talk about how you can make sure that you are making cybersecurity decisions based on data, based on fact, based on need and necessity, rather than falling into the pitfall of making those decisions based on emotion. Because again, when you make those decisions based on emotion, it doesn't always equate to the best choice or the best outcome. So we've got that and lots more in today's episode of SysAdmin Weekly. Hey everyone, it's a new week. That means it's time for another episode of SysAdmin Weekly. This is your podcast by sysadmins for sysadmins and dedicated to all the tireless tech folks working in the trenches day in and day out to keep the digital world spinning. As always, I'm your host, Andy Serwich, and I've got Paul Schnackenberg back with me on the show today. How's it going, Paul?
I am great, Andy. How are you?
Very good, very good. Hey, I think this is the first time I've had you on in 2026. So good to have you back on the show, my friend. Hopefully you had good New Year's.
I did have a good break, and it was running too short, and I had to work through parts of it, which was not brilliant. But other than that, it was great how it was.
That's the joy of providing IT services, right?
Yeah.
There's
It's one time when the clients are closed, and they're, yeah, you do whatever you want, mate, because we're not going to be there.
right. So, the number of times I've gotten phone calls on on-call rotations over Christmas before. So yeah, Eric and I were talking about that on, I think, the last episode. We were talking about holiday on-call and, all good times. Anyway, good to have you, my friend, as always. So we have a very interesting episode lined up today. So this is actually our main topic today is actually based on an article you wrote, Paul. So excited about that. We are talking about, making, how do I want to put it? Making security decisions that are based and driven by data, right?
Yes.
Because there's so much in the security space that is driven by FUD, right? Fear, uncertainty, and doubt, right? A lot of people I find make very emotional security decisions, and I can't blame them for making those decisions because the marketing in the security space is very fear-driven in a lot of cases. It depends on the vendor, right? Of course. But, we want to make sure as system admins, we are making security decisions based on data. And that's the whole crux of today's episode and the article that you wrote, Paul. But before we get to that, we have our regular recurring segments that we like to get to at the beginning of the show here. And so I guess I'll start with all of my usual plugs. So if you're new to the show, welcome. Glad to have you here. Really hope you enjoy the show. You can find all of the links that are associated with the show out at www.sysadminweekly.com. We also have a companion newsletter to the show at newsletter.sysadminweekly.com as well. And we include, commentary, links to useful tools, and links to the and some commentary about the most recent episodes of the show. So be sure to check that out. Again, newsletter.sysadminweekly.com. So that reminds me, we will be covering some comments here, but you can interact with us on the YouTube versions of the show, on the Spotify versions of the show. I am this close. And for those folks that are driving in the car, I'm showing, I don't know, maybe half an inch of space between my fingers here. I'm this close to having the GitHub communities
site up and running so that we can use that as a community hangout, if you will. Yeah, Paul, I don't know if I've mentioned that to you. Eric and I have been talking about it, but we'll be using GitHub communities as opposed to like a Discord group or something like that. So the nice thing I like about that is when I was talking with Eric about it, I said, my number one requirement here is minimum barrier to entry. I don't want anyone to have to install an app or create an account. Most likely, most sysadmins probably already have a GitHub account, and that's all you need for the GitHub discussions group. Repo I'm setting up. So that's just about done. So I'm really hoping, I've been saying this for like 4 or 5 episodes now. I'm really hoping that it will be available in the show notes for this episode. So be on the lookout for that.
It's also a great thing because it doesn't rely on anybody's algorithm. Like you're not controlled by any kind of social platform's algorithm. It's just you and the website. So, or the GitHub site.
Exactly. And I love that it's very easy to kind of configure your notifications for it as well, too, because if you just want a nice, easy bookmark to it, you just star the repo. But if you want to actually get notifications, you watch the repo instead, right? You have 2 choices. It's simple, it's easy. And again, it's that whole minimal barrier to entry thing that I'm really hoping I achieve with it. So I think we will. Anyway.
Okay.
Well, we get to our other recurring segments here in the show. The first is our News React segment, and this is the segment of the show where my co-host and I, we talk about a news headline that kind of caught our eye over the last couple of weeks. And Paul, I will let you go first on this one, my friend. What do you got?
Thank you. This may be a left field one. It's not exactly tech related, although there are some Ubiquiti cameras involved, and some Starlink terminals, and some solar panels and solar batteries. So it counts, yeah. It's stretching it a bit, but it's all right. A distant acquaintance of mine, who is a Microsoft most valuable professional here in Australia, Lars Klint, he has a farm outside of Melbourne in rural Victoria here in Australia. And many people know him from online work. He's a developer, I think, and he's been involved in the Microsoft community for years and years and years. And he moved out of the city to run an alpaca farm for a while. Anyway, he's made his home there, and he's made a lot of videos of different things and what do you call it, IoT things, so home IoT and surveillance with cameras from Ubiquiti and all that sort of stuff. Anyway, as you may have seen in the news, we've had some rough weather here in Australia in various parts. So closest to where I am, they had a lot of flooding. Down where he is, they had a lot of bushfires. And the bushfire started way over 100 kilometers, so that's 60 miles or something for our US listeners, away from where we lived, and he wasn't particularly worried. 2 days later, it was coming. They packed up 3 cars, 2 cars and a trailer with another car on it, in quite a hurry, and him and his wife left, drove down to Melbourne, stayed in a motel. And he was watching the cameras remotely as one of them, each, one by one, they started failing. Lots of smoke, lots of fire. And so he could just see things burning down as the whole thing went. And then after a while, and it came very quickly, it didn't last an enormous amount of time by the sounds of the video. And then when it was done, they got disconnected. So they thought, well, that's it. Everything's burnt down. When they come back to the place, and that's the video link, the YouTube link I'm dropping in the show notes here, he shows the devastation, and you can see these buildings, sheds and things completely incinerated. He shows the electronics and the Ubiquiti and the rack with everything in it, and it's just completely melted metal, right? And all the land and the trees and everything completely destroyed, right? And then, by miracle, turns the camera around, and their main house is untouched. Right. The hedges in front of it are burnt to a crisp, and the house itself is untouched. And he's just like, I can't explain it. He said, like, the fire was everywhere. Why it didn't touch the house, he has no idea. So he had a couple of containers with another car in it, and that survived fine too. So some damage, but yeah. So it's just I just brought it home that we often talk about. I mean, you've had a lot of bushfires or forest fires, whatever, in the US as well, and they're getting worse, obviously because of climate change. And one of the reasons I know that is because there's a firefighter here in Australia with quite a high profile. He used to be the chief firefighter in New South Wales or something. Anyway, he said they used to be able to use the northern and southern hemisphere to balance things. So when it was really bad in the US and Canada and other places in the northern hemisphere, they could borrow firefighters from the southern hemisphere, from Australia and other Asian countries, and they would fly up and help out up there, and then vice versa when it was bad down here. Well, the seasons have gotten so long now that they can't do that because they can't share the firefighters because it's not just the height of summer when they get the forest fires. Anyway, so it's all brought at home how devastating these things can be, and made it quite real for me. So I just thought I'd drop that in as a news item.
Man, that's quite a news item. I got nothing to top that. Not that I want to top that, I guess, but I'm just glad to hear that, their home was okay. I mean, yeah, the farm is part of the home, of course, right? But at least they've got a place to stay, which is better than not. So that's good news at least, right? So
they are okay. I mean, that's the ultimate thing.
That's of course that goes without saying for sure. But yes, glad to hear they're okay too. So I'll definitely put that in the show notes. That's an interesting one. So I can just imagine it. You're sitting there watching, and your Ubiquity cameras are just dropping one after another. I can't imagine that feeling. That's
I think the stages that people don't get. I know my wife was involved in a couple of forest fire decades ago, and if you had a lot of valleys and tops of valleys, tops of ridges, it actually skips the whole valley. You think, oh, that's going to take half an hour because it's going to burn through the forest in the valley. The embers fly from the top of one ridge to the top of the next ridge and sets fire to the trees there, and then to the next one. So that's why it can move so incredibly fast.
Yeah. I've always heard that they can move super fast. I mean, thankfully, where I'm at here in Michigan, we get freak crazy snowstorms. Well, that's about as bad a natural disaster as we get here. That's why there's so many data centers here, is because, well, there's not much in terms of natural disasters. But anyway, I digress. So in terms of news react items on my side, I surprisingly have not been keeping a super close eye on the news lately. I have kind of an extra long nerd hour segment this time. So I guess we'll head straight into our nerd hour segment. And there's a joke behind this. Go listen to some of the early episodes if you're interested. There's a reason why we call it nerd hour. It doesn't take an hour, but this is the segment of the show where my co-host and I, we talk about the geeky, nerdy things that we've been doing either in our personal lives or our professional lives. And I guess I'll selfishly start on this one. So I have been on something of a CLI minimalist UI type of kick lately. I mean, I've always been a big CLI guy. I mean, some of my earliest sysadmin years, I was managing Debian 3.0 machines in a K through 12 school district here in the U.S. And well, I have kept up with my CLI knowledge this whole time. And yeah, I'm a Windows guy, but I'm still a Linux guy too. And I'm a Mac OS guy. I guess it doesn't matter what the OS is, right? That said, I recently stumbled upon the Mac OS scripting engine. And so if you're not familiar with it, I wasn't until I stumbled across it. There is an underlying automation scripting engine in Mac OS where you can call a command OSA script, and you can do various interesting things with it. So, being the very CLI focused guy that I am, if I'm writing content or I'm creating a script or I author everything in Markdown. Everything is in Markdown. I use Vim as my text editor these days. And
Can I tell
I
you this,
hate.
folks? He is insane, okay? I use Word. It works great. I can attest he's not lying. He's not making this up. He's trying to make me write in books in Markdown. Right? So
I
let's
have.
go. You go on.
I have. My apologies. I love Markdown. I have to do a whole episode on Markdown with as much as I talk about it. But when I'm working on something, context switching is just absolutely horrible for me. Like I lose everything that my brain was currently processing, and it takes me 10 minutes just to get back into what I was doing. And so I want everything just a couple of keystrokes away inside of my terminal window. So I wanted to be able to control Apple Music from within the CLI without having to context switch, right? And that's when I discovered the Apple scripting automation engine, and I can pass OSA script and then a syntaxed line that actually tells the scripting engine to go pull Apple Music, tell me what's playing, or forward the track, or load a playlist, or whatever, right? Now, I didn't want to have to do these commands manually all the time. And I've been tinkering a lot with Python lately, and more specifically, the curses wrapper library, which allows you to make basic UIs inside of the terminal window. So I basically used curses to create a wrapper around the OSI script command, and I have basically a terminal front end for managing Apple Music now. But I didn't stop there. I also like to do the Pomodoro method as well, which is, 25-minute work sprint, 5-minute break. You do that 4 times, and then you take an extended, usually a 30-minute break or something like that. I had been doing just a very basic, just command line thing. So I'm like, boy, I've been doing a lot with this curses, this curses library lately. Let's GUIify my Pomodoro app inside of the terminal as well. And then I use a terminal application called Kitty that allows you to split off different panes inside of the same terminal window. So like I'll have to put a screenshot in the show notes or something. On my secondary monitor, it's like I've got Terminal Command Center now, because on one pane at the top, I've got Apple Music. One pane in the bottom left, I've got my Pomodoro timer, and then I've got a simple command line clock applet in the bottom right. And yes, I acknowledge it is ridiculous. But you know what? I don't have to change context anymore when I'm writing an article, and it is fan-freaking-tastic.
We need sound effects in this podcast. We need to have one of those little Elgato button thingies or something. We need to have a library of, applause and whoop whoop and something like that, because that deserves an applause. That is, I think, as far as in all the episodes I've been part of, at least, and the ones I've listened to, I think that wins the prize for the nerdiest thing. That is definitely the geekiest thing ever. And it makes sense. That makes perfect sense to me. Context switching is a killer. And I suck at it, so I'm really happy for you that you found a way to battle it back.
I went out and I looked for. I have to say, I went out and looked for existing tools first, and I didn't find anything that checked all the check boxes. And so I was like Thanos, putting the Infinity Gauntlet on and saying, "Fine, I'll do it myself." So
just worked. That's all good. That's all good.
I wish it was that simple, just snapping my fingers. My Python's terrible, and this is one area where I really like AI, is I can be like, okay, I think this Python block is correct. Tell me if it is or not, and what I should do to fix it. So it's been helpful in that regard. And you know what? I actually, relearned some things about Python, and I learned a lot of new things about Python in the process as well. So it was a nice little project in that regard, and I will. I'm planning on putting them inside of a Git repo and open sourcing them, and people can use them if they want. So if anybody else is a terminal nerd like I am, they can check that out. But I'll put those in the show notes if I happen to get them cleaned up and out on GitHub in time. I need to clean up my terrible Python code first, and then it's funny. I ran into a bug with the Apple Music little curses app I made because I wanted a shuffle toggle, right, to turn shuffle on and off. Well, when I did that, I had accidentally increased the scripting engine pull rate to 50 times a second. So my little applet's running, and I'm seeing some strange processes in System Monitor that I've never seen before. TCCD, login window D. I think it's just login window, actually. But both of those processes are basically underlying Apple processes that are used to determine if the current user is allowed to do the things they're trying to do. And so at a 50 per second pull rate, it was just hammering those processes over and over. And again, I'm like, why is this? Oh, because I'm polling the scripting engine at a rate that it was never intended to be pulled at. So computers do exactly what you tell them to do.
That's right. They do exactly what you tell them to do. That's the point of computers.
That's right. So anyway, that is my extensive nerd hour for this episode.
No worries. So we move on, eh? Next up is we're going to talk about my nerd hour. I suppose it is. Yes, that's my nerd hour. There you go. So this will be a little bit of an advertising here, folks. So me and another US MVP. No, that makes it sound like I'm an MVP. I and Amy Babinchak, who is a Microsoft MVP. I'm not an MVP. She and I,
on the record, you should be an MVP, my friend. I'm just saying.
There's a conversation for another day, I think. Anyway, she and I run a course. It's a once a month course for the small price of $50 per tech. We have group discounts available if there's more of you coming from one company. We've been running this for a year now, and we need some more students in the group. Basically, if you're a tech who deals with Intune, Enter ID, Defender XDR, a bit of Sentinel, sort of other Microsoft stuff, really, but those are the main ones. We basically keep you up to date on what's new every month. So she puts together a newsletter. You get that about a week before. Then it's an hour and a half session with me on the US-friendly Thursday afternoon, Friday morning for us over here in the Australian end of town. And we go through all those news things. It's very interactive. Everybody's on video, and so they can talk and ask questions or whatever. And sometimes they share their screen, and we work through it. It's a great little session, and it's a really good way of keeping up to date. We have quite a few MSPs in there who, of course, want to make sure they and their techs keep up on the new stuff. And there's a lot of new stuff because it's cloud and it changes all the time. So there'll be a link in the show notes if you're interested. You can read a bit more about it there, and of course you can contact me through Andy, and if you have any questions. And hope to see you in the next session. We just had our first session for the year yesterday, so the next one will be mid-February.
And I will say, and I'm sure I've mentioned this to you before, Paul, but I don't know if I've mentioned this on the show. Paul is a fantastic teacher and conveyor of information, folks. So highly recommended from my side as well. So
thank you.
I'm sure that comes through on, when you're explaining things on the podcast here, Paul. But I felt, I could, it warranted a mention at the very least.
It's probably not obvious for the people that we have told what my background is because I run my own MSP as well. But I am I'm a part-time Microsoft certified trainer, and I've been a trainer my whole life, really. so I do a lot of training delivery.
You've had a lot of practice. So,
Yeah.
well, very cool. I will be sure to get that in the show notes as well there, Paul. So appreciate that. Next up on my list is we have 2 comments I wanted to review, both of them from the same person. So again, as a reminder, folks, I know I mentioned this earlier, but you can leave comments on the YouTube versions of our show, as well as the Spotify version of the show, or you can just email us at contact@sysadminweekly.com as well. That'll get you in the mailbox. But these 2 comments came on episode 36. This is the episode where Eric and we had a conversation about abstraction in modern IT and how it's kind of creating a hidden problem in that we are losing sysadmins that have a really super deep understanding of the entire stack top to bottom because we're abstracting entire layers in the middle, right?
Yeah.
And so that is the whole crux of that episode. I'll put that episode in the show notes, folks. And there's 2 comments here that I wanted to cover. The first one here is both from the same user, but the first one is, and I quote here, IT is becoming such a huge field and is growing so fast. It's kind of like the U.S. national debt in more ways than one. In some ways, it feels like a house of cards. It's too big for just one person to fully understand, and it's getting really expensive. Abstraction seems like the best tool to come close to being a multi-domain sysadmin. Side note, Gen Alpha is about to start entering the workforce, and most haven't ever used a keyboard and mouse before. Unquote. And so, yes, I agree with a lot in this comment here, right? Modern IT does feel like a house of cards sometime, and while when I first started in IT years and years ago, you could conceivably have a general understanding of just about every area of IT. That is impossible now. It is so vast, it is impossible to keep up on everything. And that's contributing to the issue Eric and I talked about in that episode as well, too, right?
Yeah.
And yes, abstraction is a great tool. Don't get me wrong. We absolutely need to use abstraction. Where I have an issue with abstraction is when we close entire systems up inside of a box that I, as the sysadmin, cannot open for vendor reasons, right?
Yeah.
That's when we start having issues. If I can't, get elbows deep inside of a subsystem and figure out what's wrong with it, that's where abstraction creates a real problem. And I'll let you get a word in here, Paul. I don't know if you have any thoughts on the whole abstraction discussion.
I'm really agreeing. I mean, I couldn't agree more, really. I mean, there's a lot of junior techs that don't have the basics of understanding how the internet works, how TCP/IP works, how DNS works.
Yep.
And when you don't have to do any kind of troubleshoot, like when everything's working, it's fine. But we're not paid when everything is working. We're paid for the times when it's not working. And then to have to figure out what's going on. And if you don't have the sort of basic understanding how the technology bits, you don't have to be a Cisco, certified expert to get in the weeds there, but you need to understand the basics, for example, for networking. And I think cloud services certainly are a black box. I mean, that's the whole point, right? The vendor runs it.
Sure.
You get some logs if you're lucky. And then if something goes wrong, you contact their support because you're not going to figure it out because it's all inside of their system. So,
right. Exactly. And the side note about Gen Alpha, entering the workforce and never having used a keyboard and mouse, it's funny, my wife has worked for the last 10, 15 years in libraries, and she has run into it more than once where somebody really young, Gen Alpha, has needed help using a desktop operating system. They can use phones and touch interfaces like crazy, no problems at all, but like keyboard and mouse is completely foreign to some of them, right? Which
I think we mentioned this on a podcast in the past. We have exactly one generation of ordinary people who knew how computers worked. And that's our generation. I'll count you, even though you're a bit younger than me. Because when we grew up, if you were into computers and you wanted to play computer games or you wanted to use a computer, you had to understand how the bloody thing worked because it was going to break on you all the time. And it was much more, you just had to, because they were technically complex and they didn't work all the time like they do nowadays, mostly. So,
Yep.
So we had one generation who learned how to fix computers and understand how computers work, and every generation after that, they use computers. Sometimes they're amazing at using computers, but they don't know how they work and they don't know how to fix them if something goes wrong. So,
I mean, come on. If I wanted to play TIE Fighter, I had to learn how to shut down Windows 3.1 to DOS and reallocate memory to video, right?
That's right. Or if you wanted to play a network game of Doom, the first Doom, you had to learn Novell networking because it was the only thing it was going to run on.
That too. That too. That's right. The example I used in that episode, along these lines, do you remember having to manually assign IRQs in System BIOS?
Yeah. Yep.
That's just something that people completely take for granted now, right? It's just done for us, right? Perfect example of abstraction.
Curious, mate. I have no idea what an IRQ is. And for those who want to know, it stands for interrupt request level, and it is a part of your hardware that is not the CPU calling on the CPU for attention. Hey, I'm a network card, I got some traffic coming in. Hey, I'm a graphics card, I need to display something on the screen. Hey, I'm a whatever storage controller and I need to save something to the disk. CPU, I need some of your attention.
Yep. Perfect description. Perfect description. So, anyway,
to our topic, I think. Oh, sorry, one more. No, yes, that's right.
What's that?
No, we should move on to the content, but you have one more comment that we got to go through.
Yes. One other comment. This one's quick, right? So in the Nerd Hour segment of that particular episode, I had mentioned how I'm currently using Pi-hole inside of my home lab for DNS lookups as well as DNS filtration. And I've got it running inside of a lightweight Kubernetes cluster, and Pi-hole is great, but it is not designed to run in a stateless fashion. It's not designed to run inside of environments like Kubernetes. So I've been looking at Blocky a lot lately. I haven't implemented it yet, but it's basically the same thing, but it's stateless and designed to run containerized. This user, Unselfless, out on the YouTubes, mentions that Technetium, I think I'm saying it correctly, Technetium is a pretty good stateless DNS service for a home lab as well too. So I will check that out, look it up, and I will put that in the show notes as well, folks, in case you are interested, alongside Blocky. So I can't speak to this one because I've not looked at it, but Blocky is looking pretty good for my purposes thus far. So anyway, I think it's time for our main segment. What do you think, Paul?
I think so too.
So, as a reminder, we are talking about the security decisions that we need to make as sysadmins and why those security decisions should be made and driven by data, right? Not emotions. And data-driven security, I guess that's what I'm going to call it, right? And I think that's officially a term in security, data-driven security, right? To me, it's a lot more useful and a lot less dangerous than making decisions strictly based on emotion. Now, that said, there are some pitfalls and gotchas, right? When we talk about anything that's data-driven, garbage in, garbage out, right? I mean, we've been saying that in IT for a long time. And I'm also sensitive to the fact that data-driven has kind of become a security buzzword over the last couple of years, right? So you kind of have to be aware of that as well, too. But I think when we're speaking in generalities, comparing data-driven decision-making with decision-making that is based on emotion and fear, most usually in the security world, definitely I think data-driven is what you want to do. And Paul, you wrote a whole article basically about this topic, correct?
Yeah. So I'll add a couple of sort of toppings on top of this meal we're having here, to add some context around it. And actually, some of them weren't really in the article, but it's all almost the same thing, right? I think that the cybersecurity industry is young, and it has had a very large tail of using fear to sell. Because humans, and I think we've touched upon this in previous podcasts as well, basically humans are really, really bad at assessing risk. We were evolved by evolution over tens of thousands of years to be really good at figuring out if that Russell in the savannah next to us was a lion or a little mouse, and figure out what to do about it. That's what the risks we are good at, right? Or if the chieftain from the next tribe is going to come and chop our heads off or whatever. Whatever the reason is, those are the sort of risks that we're good at estimating. This is why we routinely get it completely wrong when it comes to personal health risks, personal or societal health risks, or whatever. For example, here in Australia, it's a big thing about shark attacks. So we'll have maybe 1 or 2 or 3 shark attacks a year. Maybe one or something is fatal. And that's from, must be hundreds of thousands or millions of people swimming in the sea, and occasionally one gets mistaken for a seal. Sharks do not go after humans to eat them. They're not interested in eating us. It's just that often, especially if you're lying on a surfboard, your outline looks a bit seal-like, and that's a prey that they normally go after. There's been lots of people, including an acquaintance of mine. He's got a big shark bite on his leg to prove it. They bite, and especially if you have a wetsuit on, they let go, right? Because it's not what they were after, right? It tastes the wrong thing. It doesn't taste what they were after. And he was fine. He said, well, I'm not blaming the shark. I was in their territory. He's not attacking me on land. I'm in the sea. That's where his habitat.
Right.
Anyway, so a lot of people are very scared of shark attacks, right? Which is incredibly rare, right? Like incredibly rare. Not a risk you really need to worry about. But then people are eating McDonald's 5 days a week. You know what I mean? Or some other, there's tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of people are dying of all sorts of health risks, or they smoke all their life and then they're surprised they die from lung cancer. That we're very, very, very bad at judging risk. So, and that is doubly so when it comes to cybersecurity, because computers are just boxes. For most people, basically, computers are magic. Right? You turn them on, you can do things, you can interact with people on social networks, you can write documents, you can use AI to talk to, and it talks back to you, and it seems like it's a real person. All of those things, right? But the actual cybersecurity risks are very, very hard, and for normal people to estimate. Like we say, don't click on links that look sus. Yeah? You see how well that works? Does that work? Does it really work? No, because nobody can bloody determine if a link is sus or not. No human can look at a URL and go, is it google.blog or blog.google or, google.com/blogs? Which one is it? Well, I don't know. I don't know which one is a phishing link and which one is a real link to an actual blog post. We can't. That's not humanly possible. So I think based on that, we tend to end up with all these solutions that are for risks that are not really super relevant to our business, whereas we miss a lot of things we could have done with the same amount of resources, budget, time, energy, whatever, for the risks that are actually a risk for our business.
And I think that one of the no worries. I was going to say that ties into one of the key statistics that you had lined out in the article around the cost of a breach. The number I saw in there was $4.4 million average cost of a breach.
Yeah.
Which, if you're a large company, sure. An SMB, Does that number still apply? And again, I think you line this out in the art. You kind of spell this out in the article, right? In that, if I'm an enterprise, depending on my size, I think most enterprises, they could eat 4.4 million if they had to. They wouldn't like it, but they could.
Yeah.
To an SMB, 4.4 million is catastrophic. It's business ending, you know?
It's business ending. It's business ending. As in, the bad guys are not going to get 4.4 million because there isn't 4.4 million in Kitty. This isn't there. So that's an IBM figure. They release that every year. I did actually look it up, and there must be some statistics behind it, but it wasn't clearly outlined where they say, like this is for medium to large businesses or something, because it just doesn't apply in the SMB space. I suppose one other thing that I want to point out is that where you get your data from is really important. I'm not saying that security vendors necessarily are going to lie about their figures, but your view of the world is necessarily biased depending on where you're looking from. Right. So if you're an email security vendor, you're going to look at email security threats. That's going to be your data. That's going to be your bread and butter. That's what you're going to do every day, right? You're not going to see endpoint threats. You're not going to see any SaaS app threats, right? So one of the reasons I relied quite heavily on Microsoft's digital defense report in this article that came out in October, November last year, so it's fairly fresh, they come out once a year, is because Microsoft has a very wide telemetry net, right? Like they gather data from Xbox Live, they gather data from Bing, they gather data from Office and Azure and all the different services they have in all those different types of services, right? So they have a better picture. Still skewed though. I know we haven't quite got to the incident response bit there, but some of the data that they have in there for what the motivations of the attackers were, I'm like, yeah, but that's really only medium to large businesses because they're the only ones that can afford Microsoft Incident Response. You know what I mean? Like, the pizza shop on the corner, when they get compromised, they're not calling Microsoft for Incident Response. So whatever the motivation there was, which is obviously often money. The other thing I want to tie in here. Yeah, go on, Andy.
I was going to say, speaking about the motivational aspect of it, that's one of the key data points that you talked about in the article, right? The source for the identified motivations in incident response was pulled from the Microsoft DDR. And, to your points, it's going to be different based on size of business, right? The one thing that stood out to me in this is it lists data theft, extortion, and destruction/human operated ransomware as the top 3 identified motivations for their particular data set. What was interesting to me is, like, when I look at those, realistically, it's all 3 of them at the same time and any given incident. Because if I'm a threat actor, I break into an organization. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to try and establish persistence, right? After that, I'm going to exfil the data, and then I'm going to put my ransomware in place. And if you don't pay my ransom, then I'm going to, use a double extortion method and say, hey, I've got your data. I'm going to leak it if you don't pay me, right? So realistically, it's like all 3 of those at the same time for, some incidents. Not all, but some.
Yeah. Yeah. They list espionage at 4%, so that's another one, right? We tend to read these interesting articles about how Chinese nation state hackers got in and they stole all the intellectual property from XY company. We go, oh, we've got to protect against that. No, you don't. Unless you're also a defense contractor.
No, you don't.
After that's the 4%, and if you're in that group because you know the kind of data you have. Right. And if you're an ordinary business, not say military or highly classified related, you're not going to have espionage after you. You might have some industrial espionage if you have a technology that's market leading in your field. Then you might be worried about another, Chinese or whatever company coming after your intellectual property. But again, you know that because you know what you're doing. So, as a business. Hopefully.
It's funny, you mentioned the espionage angle here. This is like unlocking a memory for me that I've apparently forgotten. This happened years ago. I went to a local event, and they were talking security, right? And they got up on stage and they went they went on for probably 45 minutes about how we need to protect our networks, and by extension that means we need to protect the homeland from nation state attacks. And I'm sitting in the back and I'm like, half the people in this room don't even have MFA enabled, most likely. I'm like, why are we talking about nation state attacks? Like, yes, I acknowledge they're an issue for a portion of the sysadmin population, but like, I mean, to go on for 45 minutes, anyway, that's a whole different story. But I just remember sitting in the back and thinking to myself, like, why are we talking about this?
Yeah,
Anyway.
that's absolutely. I've been in presentations like that as well, and I'm like, no, this is. I know it's completely the wrong viewpoint on the whole thing, or it's outdated. Like we used to talk about dwell time, right? That was a big thing. Right? Back in the day, they'd get in, they'd hang around for month and month. They don't do that anymore. It's part of the DDR and from lots of other sources as well. They're after money and they're not going to wait. They're going to go as quickly as they can, because sometimes they can go so quickly that even if you have a good security team and they're in place, they don't have time to react before the whole thing goes kaput, right? And the ransomware is in place, right? Because they can do it within hours. Right. So yeah, no, they often off the mark. Now, tying in, which I didn't know at the time when I wrote this article, we'll drop a link into a Decipher podcast. So the Decipher podcast is an old-timey cybersecurity podcast. It's been around for years. The people who did it, they were working at Duo, the MFA security company. That was eventually bought up by Cisco. Yep. Then Cisco still delivered the Decipher podcast. Then those people left Cisco, and there was a hiatus of few years, I don't know exactly how many years, when there was no Decipher podcast, and now they're back. One of the most recent sessions was on vulnerability management with Jeremiah Grossman and Roger Arsnake Hansen. They have a company called Root Evidence. They've been in the cybersecurity industry for a really long time. They have built a vulnerability management solution that builds on top of actuarial data from cybersecurity insurance companies. And that is really interesting. I have no financial, they don't know who I am, and I don't, I'm not advertising them. I'm just talking about this as a general concept. Because the one place that does not care about your emotions is cybersecurity insurance, right? They are trying, the ones that are left in the cybersecurity industry, several carriers have left, right? Because they said this is just too hard. Because they don't have any data, right? They can do fire insurance and health insurance and all the others because they've got hundreds of years of data to build on so they can calculate risk. Here, they try to calculate risk, and then some big organization gets completely compromised, even though they looked like they had good security, and then they get a claim for $100 million or something, and they just can't handle it. Right? It's too fluctuating. But for the ones that are left, they're trying to figure this out, and they don't care about breaches. A cybersecurity insurance company doesn't care about breaches. They only care about monetary loss, because that's going to result in a claim. So if you have a breach that doesn't result in a large monetary claim, they don't care. They only care about the ones that cost them money, because that's the ones that they have to have in their statistics to figure out how much they're going to charge you for your premium. And for example, one of the things that I learned in this podcast is that if you have a firewall, it used to be that was a plus, right? Like you'd get a lower insurance premium because you got an enterprise firewall or a set of enterprise firewalls protecting you from the bad guys on the internet. Now it is actually a deficit. you got a Palo Alto network? Oh, that's more likely that you're going to get compromised because the firewalls are so crappy that they get you compromised, or a VPN concentrator or whatever it might be, or Fortinet, picking on brands here, but whatever. Any of these, right? It's literally like, oh, you got one of those. That's more on your premium. So I thought that was interesting. Anyway, so that's a really interesting podcast, just to advertise another podcast on our podcast, but that is a good listen to understand the background and the statistics here. And hopefully we are maturing as a cybersecurity industry so that we can all have access to that sort of information, what actually makes us safer. And of course, there's some of that in the Microsoft Digital Defense Report, which is what I included in the article.
Right. And I think you pulled from a couple of other data sources as well, too, because I think you made the point in the article, but I also want to make sure we highlighted it here as well, too, is when we're talking about data-driven decisions, it's good to have a high-quality source like the DDR, but we want to avoid treating any one single source as the truth, right?
Yeah.
So having those multiple sources is certainly helpful as well. Like to your point earlier, right? If you're getting a report from an email security vendor, it's going to be skewed towards email security, right? So
Yeah.
going to have that holistic, well-rounded view to make those effective decisions, right? So.
The one area I want to still talk about is identity, because I think that's the most important one. So in the DDR, Microsoft talks about a 35% increase in identity attacks in the 12-month prior to October 25, I think it is. That's sort of their publishing cutoff date. So 35% increase, right? Like the bad guys are going after identity. And we see that. We see that in all the big breaches. You know, Jaguar Land Rover, they didn't hack some 0 day in somebody's firewall. They called up the help desk, which was outsourced, and they socially engineered them, and they got an admin account, and they signed in, and they encrypted all of their VMware infrastructure and completely killed the company, to the point that it took them, 6 weeks or something, to 8 weeks to get back in business. And the financial impact was large enough that the GDP of the UK for 2025 took a hit. So you want to look at the impact of a cybersecurity breach. I thought that was quite a huge one. So very interesting, I think, for if you're an Microsoft 365 admin here and you deal with identity as for your business, right? So we often talk about identity as the new perimeter. Okay, we all got that. So the password spray, brute forcing, and normal credential attacks is 97% of all attacks. Slightly smaller than 3% is the little slice that's left over. And that's the one that we often talk about, right? The new types of attacks. So more than 97% of identity attacks are password spray or brute force attacks. So that's across Entra ID altogether. The little 3% that's left over is token theft by malware is 2.4%. That means that you have had some sort of malware on your endpoint that steals the token after you've done an MFA. So even if you have MFA, you're still toast, because the bad guys now have your token that you got as a result of performing that MFA. Attacker in the middle that we've often talked about, evil jinx and all these other, phishing kits in the middle, where you get sent to a fake login page, you put in your username, password, get an MFA thing, put in your 2-digit code or whatever it is, and now the bad guys have your token. That is 0.23%. So it's 10% less, right? So everybody's worried about the attacker in the middle, and they're missing malware on your endpoint stealing the tokens in the first place. MFA attacks are 0.0033%. So, that doesn't mean that you shouldn't be working towards phishing-resistant authentication. You should be using passkeys or YubiKeys or Windows Hello for Business or platform identity on Mac. All of those are phishing-resistant. You should absolutely move there, because it's going to take you time to get there anyway. But, those are the attacks that we need to worry about.
And it speaks to me, this, I think we've talked about it on the show, different episodes before, is that I can't tell you how many admins I've talked to over the years that they're worried about air gapping this old legacy box that sits in a corner in a warehouse and, doing all these things to try and secure that box. And don't get me wrong, that should be on your radar. But meanwhile, in a lot of these cases, MFA is not even enabled on the environment, right? I see so many times where somebody gets zeroed in on the super unlikely attack vector. Meanwhile, the ones that are happening all the time, they just completely, they get their blinders on and they don't see it for some reason, right? And so I forget what percentage you said, Paul, for password sprays and.
Sorry, go on.
What's that?
No, I was just going to say,
I forget what
because it's a shark attack, right? Because it's something that's in the news, it's a big splashy one, and you go, wow, that's so cool technically, right? And it's the one attack in 10,000 that you don't really need to worry about, but you do need to worry about all the basic attacks that are eating your lunch because you don't have MFA or you don't have, whatever, but you don't patch your stuff.
Yep. And I forget what percentage you said for password spray and brute force. It was high though, if I remember right.
97, more than 97% of all identity-based attacks, right? Those are the ones you need to worry about. If you allow them,
and so when we talk about
to use password one, then you have a problem, right? Like you want to have a system in place.
Yes.
Microsoft, that's a free one, part of Enter ID, to not allow very common passwords.
Yep. Exactly. And I mean, when we talk about those two attack types, specifically password sprays and brute force, don't use common passwords and sufficient password length. Like those two very simple things all by themselves will address that 97%.
Yep. Passphrases. It's the one thing I'm always telling my users, all my clients, all my handful of clients, use a passphrase. Just put 4 common words together and just use that. You're going to end up with 16 to 20 plus characters. It's easy to remember, but it's long enough that you don't need to worry. If you have to come up with a password by yourself and you're not using a password manager, just use a long string of several different words. Don't worry about uppercase and lowercase and all that other stuff because the bad guys have figured all that out. Just long. If you have to.
Eric and I did an episode not that long ago where we talked about the new password guidelines from NIST, and they've finally acknowledged, they've mentioned it in the past, but their policies now acknowledge that password length is absolutely the best thing you can do to increase the safety of passwords. I think it's Steve Gibson from the Security Now podcast, one of the security podcasts I listen to on the regular. Steve does an amazing job of explaining the entropy behind passwords, right? And if I remember correctly, he said 20 to 25-ish characters is long enough to protect against both today's brute force attacks and the brute force attacks of the future for a while, right? So longer is better.
Absolutely. So we want to wrap up here with, I do want to mention the 2 other reports that I talk about in the article briefly. So Thingst Canary, the Thingst company is very well known in the cybersecurity industry. They do a lot of good work. Again, I have no financial relationship. I'm not plugging them. These reports are free. You can go and download them. Comes out quarterly. They'll go through talks and, white papers and reports in the cybersecurity industry. And they pick the good ones and they put together in a PDF report called the Thingst report, I think. Anyway, so I looked at the latest one there, and I suppose the main one that was the big one there was Dirk Jan Molima. I think we mentioned that on an earlier podcast as well. He's a Belgian or Dutch researcher, and he found this unbelievable bug in Enter ID where he could use the actor framework in Exchange Online, which was an undocumented thing that happened behind the scenes, to create a
Yep.
global admin account in any Entra ID tenant in the world that he wanted to. And he said he was very tempted to create one in Microsoft's own tenant, but he didn't want to get into trouble. So he reported it to them, and they fixed it. And as I point out in the article, the other report I've been looking at is the quarterly Secure Future Initiative report that Microsoft puts together, where they talk about their improvements to their security. And it's great progress, but how they could have missed this active framework, I can't believe that there wasn't somebody in the Exchange Online team, group, division that said, well, hang on a second, these actors, they can do a lot of stuff and they leave no trace in the logs and they have a lot of permissions. Could that be a problem? And maybe it's one of them did pull up their hand. I have no idea, but it wasn't listened to until an external researcher found the problem. So I wasn't alone in that, actually. I was reading it and I thought, yes, other people who really know what they're talking about said the same thing. So Paul Robichaud is another MVP. He's been around for ages and ages in the exchange world. And he said the same thing, right? Like, how could Microsoft have missed this with the SFI in place?
That's a big one. I mean, it surprises people to learn that, Entra is just one big directory structure, right? With, more logical separation between tenants. And so it makes that type of situation possible if there's a really bad misconfiguration or bug or whatever, right?
Yep.
I was going to say, that's the type of stuff that keeps security people at Microsoft up at night, right? But again, that's probably not one of those things that we, as your average everyday sysadmin, that's not the type of attack vector that we are focused on guarding against, right?
No, absolutely not. And again, Microsoft's perspective is going to come from them being a large enterprise organization. That's
Correct.
And they have a huge target on their back. I mean, they're attacked all day, every day. You know what I mean? Hopefully your clients or the company you work for is not a large target like that.
Yeah.
But the last thing I'm going to...
I mean, for the record...
Go on, Andy.
I was just going to say, for the record, I'm not saying that sysadmins should not have their eye on this type of news. I mean, if I'm utilizing an identity service like Entra and it's found that it has big issues like this, I want to know. That way I can take, mitigative steps to not be impacted by it, right? So
that's right. Another little footnote I thought was interesting in the DDR was there's autonomous sequence numbers, ASNs, for the networking experts out there. I hope I don't butcher this, but they're basically sort of segments of the internet that you can do routing with. And sometimes these get screwed up and all of a sudden traffic flows to some network it shouldn't flow to on the internet, right, on the global internet. So Microsoft says there's about 50,000 ASNs that carry authentication traffic, and only 20 of those are malicious. So if I'm an internet service provider and I'm ringing that DDR, or if you're an enterprise company and you can set up your own routing, what ASNs you accept and not from the internet, I would like to know what those 20 are, because I'd like to go and block those in my firewalls. And if I'm an ISP, I'd go, hang on, Microsoft, can you tell me what those 20 are? Because I'm going to kill those. We're just not going to accept traffic from those. Very good.
It would be, for sure. And again, that comes back to that whole data-driven decision-making, right? If I've got hard data that shows these 20 ASNs are known malicious, you bet I'm going to do something to block those. Absolutely.
Yeah, that makes sense. Makes a lot of sense to me.
For sure. Boy, I'm looking through our outline, and I think we've covered most everything, but there's some stuff on here that we haven't gotten to yet. And I mean, we're at an hour already in the episode, but I guess maybe what we should wrap up with here, Paul, is just some brief strategy takeaways that do actually matter, right? So, I mean, I think the first one that always, I guess, is kind of top of mind for me when I'm having these discussions, because as a sysadmin, right, you need to take action to address some of these risks. And taking action in the business world often means, hey, I need budget, right? Which means you need to go talk to leadership. And that's where you need to be able to frame the cybersecurity risk as business risk, right? And it's really difficult to do it without approaching it from the standpoint of fear, but you have to do your best, right, to correlate that business risk. Cyber risk is business risk type of thing, right? I think that's an important step that needs to be taken.
Absolutely. And here's my tip. If you're an IT guy, you're in the IT department, you speak mostly to IT people, and your first language is geek, go and talk to some business mates. Either make friends with some business people in the accounting department or wherever you can find, or if you have friends outside of the organization that are in the business world, talk to them and learn a little bit about their language, because you're going to need that language. You cannot speak geek to decision makers or the board and expect them to understand. They do not understand geek. It's like you're speaking French to people who speak English. It just doesn't work. You got to translate it into some kind of business risk language because they understand that. So learn a little bit about that when you talk to them.
For sure. That's good advice. This bullet point, when I wrote it down, seemed like a good idea at the time, but now I'm looking at it and I'm like, this is a whole podcast episode in and of itself. The question of, hey, where does AI-powered security help with this problem? And we could spend a whole episode on that one question, right? But I think for me, when I look at that, it all comes down to tooling. Right? I'm going to choose the best tool that addresses whatever risk I'm trying to solve. And if that's an AI-powered tool, great. That all said, we actually, where I work, we did a poll of CISOs back in the middle of the summer of 2025. And it seemed like at that time, and it might have changed a little bit since then, but at that time, it seemed like most CISOs and security departments were very much in a testing phase with AI-powered security tools. I think that's going to we're going to see more of those in production as we move forward. But absolutely, if you find an AI-powered security tool that can help address a risk you're trying to solve, start testing it today, right? You got to test it, and you got to be able to trust it before you put it into place, I guess, is what I would say with AI-powered security tools.
I think in the future podcast that we're about to schedule, I think we should talk also about the risk of AI. So how do you use AI to protect your organization, but also do you manage the risk of AI in your organization? That is definitely a whole podcast. We're not fitting that into this one.
For sure. So I don't know if you caught the last podcast episode of 2025, Paul, but I pulled a solo episode and I ranted about the fact that, in my opinion, there are no good web browsers left because Firefox, Mozilla announced that they are becoming a AI browser, which now introduces a whole new threat model that the industry doesn't understand yet. And so
that's right.
There's a whole conversation to be had about just AI and browsers, let alone AI everywhere else in the enterprise, right?
That's right. And the others spy on you too much, and all their AI browsers from scratch. So there's no good browsers.
I just saw a headline, and maybe I should have had this be my my News React headline. I swear I just saw a headline about how somebody had gotten Copilot to exfil data.
It's called reprompt. If we're talking about the same thing, I saw reprompt a couple of days ago. It's a very interesting attack. I only skimmed the beginning bit of it, so I can't outline it here. I don't have enough technical details, but very interesting. And we're going to keep seeing this. We're just going to keep seeing it, right? Because generative AI, chatbots, agents, whatever, they can't differentiate between control and user data, control information and user data. The computer science has spent the last 70 years, 60 years, whatever it is, separating those two, because from a security point of view, you have to. And generative AI is like, no, we're just going to mix it in together. Instructions and data in the same place, it'll all be great. And that's fundamental. And
nothing bad's going to happen today.
That's going to happen. If you run the NCSC in the UK before Christmas put out a shortish report, well worth reading, where they talked about this, like this, because it's called prompt injection, right? And people think, oh, that's like SQL injection, so I can protect against it. I just got to sanitize the input. No, the prompt injection is not the right word, really, because it is a fundamental feature of how the technology works, and you cannot safeguard around it because the bad guys will find a way around your safeguards. It's just how it is. So we just got to live with it, right? Or not use generative AI, which I don't think is a future-proof strategy. So
most likely not. We did. There's a lot of tangents to be had in this topic. I guess if I would wrap up anything for this particular episode, one question I always get when I'm having these types of discussions is like, okay, I've got limited budget and staff. How do I prioritize controls with that limited budget and staff? And I would go back to our discussion earlier about the password spray and brute force attacks. What attacks, what risks are you as an organization most likely to run into? And how can you, with the money and resources you have, most effectively address those specific risks? Those are the risks that you should be prioritizing over everything else. And then just go down the list, right? Go down the list.
Yep. Couldn't agree more.
Anyway. Well, Paul, I think we ran out of road on this one. We're an hour and 10 in, and we should probably let folks get back to their day. So
I think so.
As always, it's good to have you back on the show, my friend. We're going to have you back, it sounds like, to have a discussion about using AI responsibly and safely within your organization. So I think we're going to be scheduling that one here soon. So, but good to have you as always, my friend. I enjoy our conversations.
This was great. Really enjoyed it. Hope that was useful for people.
Yeah, definitely. And folks, appreciate you spending some time with us. Hopefully you found some value in today's episode. So, I haven't said this yet in 2026, but I'm going to say it now. Smash that like and subscribe button. I hate myself every time I say that, but smash that like and subscribe button if you found value in today's episode. We really appreciate that. And, go ahead and share it with an admin that you think would find it useful, right? We want to make our community as large and helpful as possible, right? And that's, again, where the GitHub discussions thing that we're setting up is coming into play as well, too. Hopefully we can crowdsource some SysAdmin superpower, right? And anyway, so again, we appreciate those likes and subscribes. And again, you can find us at www.sysadminweekly.com. You can find the newsletter at newsletter.sysadminweekly.com. And again, if you want to contact the show, you can do so using the comments on YouTube or Spotify, or reach out to us at contact@sysadminweekly.com as well. With that, we'll let you get back to your week. Enjoy the rest of your day. Stay safe out there, and we will catch you again next week for a future episode of SysAdmin Weekly. Have a good one.